Hey, this is Schuyler from themixingprocess.com, and in today's video I want to teach you about attack and release in compression. I want to show you how it works, how to use it, and most importantly, how to recognize when the attack and release isn't set correctly and it's causing issues in your mix. A lot of audio engineers really understand the threshold and the ratio function of compressors, but they don't really understand attack and release. It's kind of a mysterious function, and a lot of times it just gets left untouched because people don't want to mess with it. So I want to show you what it sounds like when attack and release isn't really set correctly, because it has a huge impact on what the audio and the compression sounds like on your tracks. So before we dive into a project, let's go ahead and review what attack and release actually is. What are the definitions of those things? So attack is the amount of time it takes to reach the desired compression ratio after crossing the threshold. So what does that actually mean? Well, as your signal crosses the threshold of your compressor, there's an amount of time that it takes to go from no compression all the way up to that full ratio compression that you have set. So if you have a 4-to-1 ratio set, then it takes time for the signal to go from no compression all the way to the 4-to-1 ratio. That amount of time is called the attack time. The release is the opposite of that. It is the amount of time that it takes for the compressor to go from that 4-to-1 ratio all the way down to no compression at all. So they're kind of on either end of the ratio there. So now that you kind of understand what attack and release is, let's go ahead and dive into a project here, and we'll listen to what it sounds like when the attack time is set really quickly and when it's set really slow. And same thing with release. And we'll kind of listen and talk about what sound it creates and how that sound affects the compressor.
Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come.
So it's very subtle there, but what I hear right off the bat is when I turn that attack as fast as it'll go, it really squashes the transient of her voice. So as she's singing, the new transient comes through and it really clamps down on it hard. It really levels out the whole sound. Well, it's doing the same amount of compression. It's just the attack time affects how that compression works and how it affects the audio, what the timing of that compressor is. Now, what happens when I turn it as slow as it'll go? Let's find out.
Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come.
So as you can see here on the meter, it's really not doing much of any gain reduction. And that's because the attack time is so long that transient has come and gone and moved on before that attack time is up and that compressor starts to work. So let's go ahead and turn this back to kind of where I had it before, almost 3 milliseconds there. All right, and let's do the same thing with release here.
Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come.
Okay, so for this, what I'll notice with this thing is it's almost like the release just can't wait to let go of it. And it's really kind of a push-pull. It's kind of a jerky motion. It's not smooth at all. It's releasing it so fast that it's kind of, it's like hiccuping in the audio. It sounds really strange. So obviously that's not going to work either. Let's turn it to as slow as it'll go.
Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come. With all creation I sing praise to the King of Kings.
Okay, so for this, it's the opposite of that. So the release is holding on so long that by the time the next transient comes through, it's still compressing the last one. So it's taking out all of that dynamic, the up and down of that vocal, and really smashing it out, holding it out, and it's not breathing correctly. So if the attack is too fast, it'll compress the transient, making the signal sound lifeless. It'll squash it too much where there's no big peaks with that transient, and that'll make it sound really squashed, really lifeless, like there's not a lot there. If it's too slow, it won't compress enough of the signal, and you'll have the opposite problem. You won't have the desired gain reduction in order to control that dynamic. For the release, if the release is too fast, it won't breathe with the song. It'll sound really rushed and just kind of like it's tumbling out of control. And if it's too slow, it'll still be compressing by the time the next transient comes along, and it won't sound like it's really breathing with the vocal. So with that being said, we got to figure out, before we open a compressor and decide what we're going to set the attack and release to be, we got to figure out what our objective is. So now we know kind of the extremes. We got to find out how to find that happy medium where we get the right amount of gain reduction, but we get the right attack and release time where it really breathes and enhances what we're listening to. So we got to know what the goal is. Here's kind of some basic guidelines of how this usually works, some basic rules to follow. And there's endless blends of these rules that you can find, but just kind of as a guideline, a slow attack and a fast release is going to give you the most natural, transparent sound. It preserves the kind of the dynamic of that signal, but also it allows you to get enough of that compression and that smooth flow. On the other hand, if you have a fast attack and a slow release, it does the opposite of that. It really squashes that transient. It sounds less natural. It sounds a little bit more aggressive and punchy. So if that's the sound we're looking for, we're going to use more of a fast attack and a slow release. And like I said, you can find a blend of any of these things and get it to match exactly what you're looking for. So here's the application to this. Now that you know kind of what it sounds like, to what the attack and release sounds like, you know kind of the basic guidelines of how it works together, the application of this is usually I will set the attack after the threshold and ratio is set. I'll set the attack first, and I'll set it based on my objective, like we just talked about. Am I trying to make this sound really smooth and flowy and natural, or am I trying to make it stick out and punch a little bit? So I'll set the attack based on that. Once the attack is set, I will then go set the release to kind of match what I did with the attack. If I need it to be big and punchy, I'll set it one way. If I need it to be really smooth and breathe with the vocal or with the signal, then I'm going to set it another way. So there's, again, a blend of a million different ways you can do this, but you have to understand what is the objective, what are you trying to accomplish in that compressor, and you're going to set the attack and release based on those things. So now that you know that, I hope this was really helpful for you to kind of break down what the attack and release does, how to use it, and how to recognize that sound when it's not really doing what it's supposed to do. If you're new to this whole mixing world, it can be really overwhelming. So I have a guide for you on my website, themixingprocess.com. It's called the 7-Step Mix, and it walks you through the 7 steps that I take in a mix: EQ, compression, gain structure, effects, and running through all those things. And it teaches you a really systematic way to do it so you don't miss any of those important steps and you feel like there's kind of a system to follow. I think it'll be really helpful for you. It's a completely free download. Go get it today on my website, themixingprocess.com. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.